Welcome to the Elephant TV. My name is Abdullahi, and our guest today is Dr. Halkano Wario. Dr. Wario, welcome to the Elephant TV.
Thank you so much, Abdullahi. I'm extremely delighted to be here, and this is an amazing opportunity to have conversation, as we always do, on a topic that is extremely interesting and relevant in our time, especially when we are going towards an election in a country that has had this problem of extremism for some time. Thank you, Abdullah.
You're most welcome. So, Dr. Wario, I think the best place to start is, northern Kenya, especially Isiolo and also the refugee camp in Dadaab, have been deemed a hotspot for radicalization. You've been working on this issue for some time now. What is your assessment?
These regions, which border Somalia, which some border Ethiopia, and which others border the Indian Ocean, especially Kwale, Kilifi, Lamu, Mombasa, then Tana River, Garissa, Wajir, Mandera, Marsabit, Moyale, Isiolo. These are counties that have been historically sort of very porously near international borders. At the same time, these are areas that are also have faced some level of underdevelopment and resource misallocation in past regimes, especially the first two regimes in Kenya. And given their proximity, say, to Somalia, it's experienced a lot of cross-border attacks, but at the same time, there have been considered a number of youth from this area who heeded the call to join Al-Shabaab from 2007 to date, in a way. And this has more to do with the local discourses of underdevelopment, marginalization, and at the same time, lack of opportunity that may provide these youth with that ability that if they join such a group, they might find employment and so on. So in a way, it's a mix of factors, both individual, but at the same time, it can be also structural in a way. Thank you.
I want us to speak about those structural issues. This is a region that, beside, underdevelopment, it has also, the state has responded in a very heavy way. This region is probably the most militarized region. Just take an example of Isiolo. There are 2 or 3 schools of training. You have one camp, and there are other military camps that are being built in Marsabit all the way up to Moyale. You have one in Garissa that was built the other day. Do you, speak to how the government response, sometimes heavy-handed, could have led to some sense, people feeling marginalized, they are underdeveloped, and whenever there is conflict, the government responds in a very heavy way. Can you speak to these as it relates to radicalization as well?
If we go historically, this region of Upper Eastern and Northeastern were part of the country that were very reluctant to be part of the nation-making project at the beginning of this country's independence. And therefore, this region saw maybe 1.5 decades of securitization regime that had not elapsed in a way or another. So still you will find more roadblocks. You'll still see more policemen asking any person who goes in or out of this region for the identity card and birth certificate and others, of which acquisition of these documents sometimes are a hard task, especially for locals, because they have subjected to a different regime of identity making and identity formation that the rest of Kenyans might not be made into. But largely since 2007, when this group called Al-Shabaab rose, and from 2009, when there was uptake in the number of recruitment that went, and of course 2011 when Kenya went in, the region was very much experiencing what we in studies around this question called counterterrorism, where you find hard military in order to subdue the perceived enemy or their sympathizers. And increasingly, you found during that period a lot of high-handedness and so on. But from 2016 onward, there was a change of heart in how to fight radicalization and extremism. And this largely has to do with the international perspective around this hard approach. There was a feeling, especially towards the end of Obama's regime, Obama's government, that there's a need for a prevention-oriented intervention. And so Kenya saw in 2016 all counties across Kenya were expected to develop this document, and who are among the first to develop? The coastal community, especially Kwale, then afterwards Mombasa, afterwards Kilifi, afterwards Lamu and Tana River, then the northeastern, and then finally Marsabit and Isiolo. This region therefore had a first-hand experience of both the hard approach, which is the counterterrorism, but again, increasingly before the rest of Kenya, this softer approach, which is called countering and preventing violent extremism. So we see the response as both, this two-pronged approach, but we can speak about the success and the challenges that faces this softer approach, especially in the northern parts of Kenya.
That is exactly what I wanted, you to get into. It's a good segue into that. You've been, involved in developing some of the county county plans for, countering violence extremism in the north. Can you speak about not just the processes, but what your effort has, surfaced, and what are some of the salient issues that came out in how the radicalization is going and how the state is responding, and do the counties have the ability to address some of those things?
Now, this first and foremost, I think even in your own knowledge, Kenya is one country that is extremely forefront in legislation, forefront in policy making, forefront in putting together plans. And often putting together plans is one thing, which we do beautifully with documents that are flawless in terms of conceptualization and so on. Then when it comes to implementation, it's a whole different ballgame. Now, if you take from that perspective, we currently have 47 county action plans. In fact, Nairobi is among the first counties that have passed the legislation to empower this county action plan. I read the Nairobi bill and I had a bit of reservation around it, but that's a question for another day. Now, when we look at the county action plans across, and especially the Pioneer County Action Plan, which are largely in the Muslim majority region of coastal Kenya and northeastern Isiolo plus Marsabit. The whole process of making this document is often anchored around two entities: one government agency and a civil society organization that has an anchorage kind of thing in the county that these county action plans are being made. Take the coast, for instance. If it is Kwale, it will be one national agency that deals with coordination of all these CV activities, which is referred to as the National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC, and then Muhuri. Huria. So same case in northern Kenya, these anchor civil society organizations were forefront in working together with the national agencies that are dealing with this issue. But again, behind all this making of these policies are interested donor development agencies. These donor development agencies, whether they're funded by USAID or DFID or EU or whoever, have also certain positionality around the question of extremism and radicalization. And of course, there's a whole different discussion that can be gone on what exactly is the interest of the development partner. But now, coming to the process, essentially the process often involves a lot of consultative discussion with key stakeholders. These key stakeholders are often the national government officials, county government officials, civil society organization, special interest group like women, youth, disability, and so on, community leaders, religious leaders. So it's a much bigger group of individuals who have different stake in seeing prevention strategies work. And so the document often goes through this consultative period of how do we deal with this? How are we going to validate it? How are we going to lab making it? The county government, and there's the national government. The national government is often represented in this discussion by county commissioner, who is part of the national government administrative officials on the ground, together with the chiefs and the sub-chiefs. Then on the county government side, there's the governor or his or her representative, and a whole host of departments that deal with youth, women, employment, give it whatever name. As I've, I think, had discussion before, this CV appears to be a mixed bag of everything that can be listed as such. So it could be something like, empowering youth to get employment, or it could be something as mundane as working with religious leaders to create counter-narrative. Whether this works or not is a whole different question again. So once this consultation period is done and the document is put together, the document now sits in Isiolo, in Marsabit, in Mandera, in Wajir, in Garissa, in Hola, and other, in Lamu, in Likoni or Kilifi. So each of these county headquarters is now where the county action plan sits. It's a document that's essentially to be run by both the county government and the national government. There's been a lot of teething problem that has emerged from the very beginning on who should be the owner of this document. Essentially, county governments do not appear to allocate money for it. The national government officials do not have budgets to run the document. So most of the bulk of implementation of this document now falls on the civil society organization. And so the civil society organization have sort of, not necessarily monopolized, but spearheaded this process of implementation. And this, to a great extent, has been successful because unlike both the national government that may not have resources or the county government that does not allocate resources, the civil society organization now have to source again, perhaps mostly from the development partners that develop these documents, to see to it that there's some coordination between the national government, the county government, and the same. So it's a mixed bag in terms of conceptualizing and putting together. But again, it's much more of a serious balancing act when you see the implementation 2 to 3 years down the line with the COVID-19 disruption and name it, and resource not being allocated to it. This document not being anchored in the county's integrated development plan, CIDP. So we're seeing a phase of experimentation that's still going on. And again, if I could add one more spanner into this, there was a move, especially after the first CAPs. The first CAPs were called first generation, second generation CAPs. They were essentially done by a consultation process that lasted anything between 1 to 3 months. Then I think after Dusit attack in 2019, the president made a statement that these CAPs that are working at the coast should be in every county. So the government acted on this presidential directive. So all the other CAPs were made, and these CAPs were made on a 1-year implementation plan, unlike the other ones that had 5-year, 4-year kind of plan. And these CAPs used very stringent, very narrow, very practical 1-year implementation plan that were anchored on a framework called Objective Key Result Framework. And so the pioneer counties now, from Mandera, Wajir, Garissa, all to the coast, including Isiolo, were expected now to shift to this 1-year model. And this was essentially, again, supported by donor funding, but at the same time, very key role being played by national security agencies and the county government. And so at the moment, most of the counties have adopted this 1-year implementation structure. But all in all, we could say that to a great extent, this kind of policy making and engagement really opens space, especially for local communities, to be able to air some of the key things that they face, including, say, state repression, harnessing counterterrorism measures by national security government officials, to issues of jobs, issues of identity card making. So it opened up a new opportunity for raising some of the key issues that people feel often pull people or push people towards these violent extremist groups.
That is brilliant. I mean, my experience with the CAPs was that it felt like a wish list of all the things that needed to be done. And my worry even then as is now is that I knew the Mombasa one very well, the Kwale one very well. And when I saw the figures that were associated with it and the list that needed to be done under every pillar, I was a little bit worried. Now that you said it opens up, an opportunity, I wanted to indulge you regarding the indigenous systems that are in place in most of these communities. Largely, these communities are indigenous. Largely, these communities that still deploy some of the traditional mechanisms of solving some of these things. To what extent do the CAPs include or do not include these indigenous frameworks?
CAPs are essentially development-oriented policies. So they have certain biases towards Western, if we could say, or non-Kenyan. I remember Chief Justice after the 2010 Constitution saying that people should try to see how they can use alternative justice system than all the time rushing to courts to have these things solved. The Northerners are largely pastoralists or former pastoralists who have now ended up in towns, and they still have that pastoralist ideas in their blood and so on. And a lot of decisions, a lot of discussion around conflicts are often, and again, up to now, done under trees or done in the halls, but still the canopy is still that idea of sitting together to solve issues. There's a way in which when you read this document, you don't have the feeling that aside from this structured, 1 year, 10 year, 5 year, 3 year implementation of things, we don't give chance to these flexible, very fluid ways of decision making, very fluid ways of addressing problem of conflict. For instance, if community X kills community Y in northern parts of Kenya, there's a whole discourse around how can we ensure that this doesn't bring revenge. And so people will take some cows or some goats and say, we are very sorry for what our guy did. We will give this number of camels or this number of cows. Now, these communities that are facing radicalization they also face two regimes of governance. And I think this applies to any area where insurgencies operate. During the day, you have the national government. During the night, you have the insurgencies operating. If we could call jihadist insurgencies, I don't know whether they just have that privilege.
Yeah.
Now, these communities have a way to stand up to groups that extort things from them if they are given capacity to discuss this and to be able to know how best to address. Insurgents also have clans in a way. So whoever is the leader or sub-leader of a region can actually be a subject of also clan conflict resolution mechanism. And therefore, if certain way of alternative justice resolution system is put in place, then we could see possibilities of these communities be able to be proactively resist these using their own community-based conflict resolution mechanism. They could actually approach whoever is fighting them across and say, our clan on this side feels that these insurgents are attacking us, and we know this person who is in charge of this is from this clan. We are going to, tell their clan elders that they should know our territory does not entertain this kind of problem. But again, that brings in the whole discourse of where is the state, and the state is often very jittery when discussion around security is done and they're not part of the discussion. So we have to see how well communities can be resiliently built and given our leeway in order to understand how to properly solve this problem without also having antagonistic responses from the state towards them.
That's brilliant, because I think, particularly in the North, sometimes you have your traditional rules, and then, you have the faith, you have the state, you're part of the ummah, you're part of the country, you're part of your clan. So you're constantly trying to negotiate all these places. Finally, before I let you go, we're heading into an election in the next few weeks. What are your worries? What are things that keep you late up at night regarding the CV or terrorism, considering that Somalia is going into an election that is protracted, Ethiopia has got its own conflict, and these are the countries that neighbor these regions in the north?
For Somalia, I think the attitude of groups like Al-Shabaab towards election is very clear. They consider it as kufr or disbelief. They consider democracy as Western imported concept of governance that doesn't sit with, quote unquote, their own understanding of how Somalia should be governed, which they have very narrow, exclusivist interpretation of democracy or governance, which often excludes women, minorities, including small ethnic minorities in Somalia. So their attitude towards election, especially from the Somalia national politics, is very clear. They do not entertain it, and therefore people who participate within it are subject to their judicial process of punishment and crime and so on. But Kenya's election is to Al-Shabaab, in a way, if I look at it from my own perspective, a very ambiguous process. Because for one, Kenya is a Muslim minority country. We have majority Christian population. They've always said, you guys join us instead of sitting in that country where you are being oppressed and so on. So for them, Kenya's election is far and at the same time near. Why am I saying that? In areas like Lamu and also border regions of in northeastern, clans are the same, sub-clans are the same. So they are interested in a way in the election, but not necessarily to influence it. So if one is very keen to look at trends, for instance, the last 6-7 months, there's been, a very significant, noticeable, perhaps very noticeable increment in numbers of attacks, especially in Lamu, against lapset installation, especially against lapset installation, and against government installations and against security installations. So these are not necessarily related with election, but we've seen from newspaper reportings analysis in the past where they have either stolen IEBC BVR materials or hijacked cars that were carrying election materials, and looked at Kenya also in a way, or released videos and telling people not to participate in election. But at the moment, we've not seen any video or any propaganda directly related with our election. But as people gather, as people discuss, my hunch is between now and election time, there might be some increment around of their own, cross-border activities, kinetic activities, especially in Lamu and in parts of Northeastern. I think security agencies and the national government, officials on the ground are quite aware of this kind of possibility, and they have tried to beef up security along this. But at the same time, I think elections give an opportunity that groups like Al-Shabaab do not want, a chance for local communities to elect their own leaders, to go and sit in Lamu, to go and sit in Garissa, to go and sit in Mandera, to go and sit in Isiolo, to go and sit in Marsabit, and discuss local issues and allocate resources. And I think when perhaps a new government comes in and adds more resources, the whole aspect of devolution becomes much more clearer when an MCA from Ijara or from Garsen or from Peketoni can make a decision about a road to be tarmacked and so on. So for them, long-term, devolution itself works against their quote-unquote the best way of raising people's emotions up of marginalization. So it's in their interest to try to see how they can disrupt such kind of positive decision-making structures around the ground. But at the same time, of course, the whole governance and devolution is not literally the best thing that has happened in Northern Kenya when you look at accumulation of wealth among individuals, nepotism, that again subsequently creates another layer of marginalization, not from Nairobi now, but from the county capitals of these counties.
No, that is true. I mean, I think devolution has created, marginalization with a local flavor that, it's largely an elite from the region marginalizing people, and they can't blame it on Nairobi anymore. We'll leave it at that for now, but thank you so much, Dr. Halkano, for your time. I hope we'll find another time to be able to have another conversation similar to this one, but on a completely different topic.
Thank you. I'm extremely glad to have had this discussion with you, and I'm looking forward to subsequent discussion. And this is a topic I think both you and myself are quite interested at, because as people who have roots back there, it is in our interest to see how this pertinent question of security, which is again mixed with ethnicity, which is again mixed with different layers of transnational dynamics, can be amicably solved, and people can have really a very developed understanding of how they can see their future.
Thank you.